I understand that Mark Meckler has arrived, and I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Mark. He is one of the co-founders of the National Tea Party Patriots organization. He was an inspiration to Robert and me. Without him and just a couple of other people, most of this wouldn't have happened. And so we are indebted to him. He has been doing just great work for Americans. And so, Mark, if you'd come up, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you for having me today, and thank you guys for being out here. Really, the big round of applause goes to you guys for being here. Big round of applause to all of you. So, and thanks to the bus. I was with the bus yesterday in Sacramento, so thanks to these folks that have come out, and they're going to tour the state and spread the ideas of liberty and freedom around the state. Lord knows we're lacking in liberty and freedom in California, aren't we? It's gotten a little crazy here in the state. I've had the privilege to travel all over the country over the last 3 years. I just got back from Texas. They have a lot more liberty and freedom there. It seems like the economy's doing a little bit better there too, isn't it? Yeah. Amazing how that works, that the bureaucrats and the politicians don't seem to understand. We even recently had a Republican delegation from California that had to take a trip to Texas to try to figure out what they're doing right in Texas. We figure if they had to take a trip to figure it out, they probably shouldn't be in the House and the Assembly here in California, right? So basically what I'm doing is going around the country, and as I travel around over the last 3 years, there's a common theme that comes up, whether I'm speaking at a Tea Party event, or I'm speaking to the few politicians who are actually on our side, or anybody, whether they're left or right, that actually understands what's going on in this country. And what they understand, what we understand, is that the government has slipped away from the people, right? Do you guys agree with that? So we're in charge. The folks in Washington don't seem to know that. The folks in Sacramento don't seem to know that. And it's true all across the country in the state capitals, that the folks who are in the seats of power don't understand that the people are the sovereigns in America. America is a country that's based on a simple concept. It's simple, but it's incredibly historic. It's the first time in the world's history that a country has been based on the concept of liberty. The idea that men and women should be free to determine their own destinies, their own forms of government, who represents them, that is unique in human history. If you look at the pendulum of human history, it swings back and forth, right? And people will tell you that it swings from left to right. And that's true maybe in our country, but if you look at all of human history, the pendulum swings all right, but it swings from tyranny to really bad tyranny, right? The United States is this unique beacon of liberty in human history based on the concept of self-governance. I want to talk to you a little bit today about what self-governance means. I think there are 4 pillars that we need to restore self-governance in this country. Would you guys agree that we're suffering from a lack of self-governance in this country? Yeah. So if you look at the statistics, you're absolutely right. 80% of Americans right now, 80% say that the federal government no longer is legitimate. It no longer has the consent of government. That's pretty radical. That means only 20% of us out across this great country believe that the people in Washington, D.C. are legitimate representatives for the people of the country. And it makes sense. The vast majority of Americans believe that we have too much debt and too big of a deficit. Do you guys agree with that? So I say vast majority, the number's over 75% of Americans believe that. How is it that regardless of who's in power, Republicans or Democrat, the debt increases and the deficit increases? How can that be when the vast majority of us believe that that's wrong? And the reason it can be is because the people who are elected are disconnected from their constituents. Do you guys agree with that? So we vote, we do what we're supposed to. I'm sure all of you guys vote. We go to the polls, we cast our ballots, and the folks that we elect go to Washington or go to Sacramento, and they don't do what we send them to do. Do you guys feel like they're doing what you sent them to do? No. So the system's broken, and there's some fundamental reasons it's broken. The first reason that it's broken is that we have a cycle of incumbency. Right, so folks are elected, and they get there to Washington especially, and they are elected and reelected, whether we like them or not. And you will hear the pundits tell you, well, the reason that that happens is because folks, while they may hate Congress in general, and Congress' current approval rating is 6%, they'll say, but people love their own representative. But statistics say that that's not true. Today, most people don't like their own representative. Overall approval rating of individual representatives in Congress across the country, district by district, for the first time in history is below 50%, but they keep going back. because the system is set up to be an incumbency protection machine. And how does that work? They go to Washington, D.C., and they have the franking privilege. So they can, for free, print materials out of their office budget, and on your dime, they can send mailers to their district telling people why they're so great. Now, do you know any challenger who gets to use the franking privilege? Hundreds of thousands of dollars spent. I was just on John Stossel's show this Thursday. 400,000, 500,000, 300,000 these incumbents spend to tell their constituents how great they are. That's part of the incumbency protection machine. That's the official machine. They have the bully pulpit. They can go on the media anytime they want. Do the challengers have that opportunity? No, they don't. And then there's the really unofficial incumbency machine. The idea that if you're a challenger, you need money, right? But you also need campaign consultants. No professional consultants will go to work for the challenger. Why do you think that is? If they do, they're told by the machine, Democratic or Republican, that they'll never work again. Do the parties like challengers to incumbents? No, they don't. They don't. It's not profitable for them. They want the old boy network to preserve and the old gal network. They want the same people in office. This is how they consolidate power. So there's a machine that is in place to promote incumbency. In 2010, it was a banner year for change. Wasn't it a pretty good year for change? It was, because of you guys. So we had the biggest turnover in the general election in the House since 1938. That's a good thing. You should be proud of that. And in the primary elections, in a banner year, 396 incumbents stood for re-election. 396 stood, and only 4 lost their races in the primary. In the whole country, less than 1%. It's outrageous. It can't be. 85% of districts in this country are fixed districts. They will not change hands in the general election. So that means almost nobody's losing their race in the primary, and then 85% of us don't have a vote that matters in the general election. That means we really don't have a representative House of Representatives anymore, do we? And that's the reason that we feel like we're not represented, because we have this cycle of incumbency. Part of the reason we have the cycle of incumbency is because they play us into a paradigm that works for them. That paradigm is left versus right. That paradigm is Democrat versus Republican. It's black versus white, it's rich versus poor, it's marriage and family folks versus gay rights activists, it's pro-life versus pro-choice. You know, the media says we're a divided country. They say that we don't like each other and that we have polarized views. The truth is the polarized views come from the politicians. They like us that way. They're playing us. This is like the World Wrestling Federation. They come out on stage, they go to the committee hearings, and they yell at each other and they say mean things to each other, but afterwards they pat each other on the back. And if that wasn't the case, then how come they're not cutting the budget? How come they're not actually putting forth legislation that changes anything? Because all they care about is being reelected, and they're going to use you against you to do it. They're going to use left versus right because they want you to hate each other. They want us to hate each other. And it works really well for them. It's very profitable for this machine of incumbency. So we have this problem with left versus right that we're all playing into. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that we should be moderates. I'm not a moderate guy. I'm a right-wing guy. I'm saying that the fundamental issues that are facing our nation are neither left nor right. Debt and deficit. Do you know of anybody who's run on the platform that they would promote and they want to see a $1.4 trillion deficit? Do you know any Democrats who it says, you know, Democrat so-and-so for a $1.4 trillion deficit? Not even the Democrats run on a platform like that. So this is what they're doing to us. They're gaming us to create this cycle of incumbency, to make us hate each other. This is what they want out of us. And in order to change that, we need to empower the citizens. We need to engage the citizens. That's what the Tea Party movement has done. You guys are out here on a Sunday afternoon. It's getting chilly. You stuck around. Are you guys engaged? Yeah. Are you going to vote? Yeah. Okay, so you're out here fighting the fight. You're engaged. I can tell you we're engaged in numbers greater than ever before because of this movement. But the Tea Party movement isn't the end. It's just the beginning. It's going to take a lot more than the Tea Party movement to change this country. We can't be centered on ourselves and think that the Tea Party movement is the be-all and the end-all. It's not. It's just the beginning of what needs to happen in this country. We need to be talking to our friends and neighbors that are not Tea Partiers. We need to be talking to people that are not Republicans, that do not identify themselves as conservatives. Because trust me, they feel just like we do. I'm going around and speaking at events that are not traditional conservative events. I was just up in Seattle, Washington at a very progressive event. To give you an idea how progressive, I was the keynote speaker in the morning, and the day was closed out by none other than Van Jones. That's pretty left, isn't it? Okay, but I stood in front of an audience of 500 people and I asked them, how many of you believe that the people you send to Congress represent you? They don't believe it. They don't think they're represented either. I asked them, do you think that Barack Obama has done the things that you want Barack Obama to do? They say no, he hasn't. It's very dangerous. It's a dangerous time in our country when people left and right both believe that the people they send to Congress are not doing what we ask them to do. Now, we wouldn't agree with the folks on the left at that conference with what Congress should do. But Congress should be doing what the people want, right? Not what they want. This is the fundamental problem. And if I'm in Berkeley, California, and I'm talking to an audience in Berkeley, I will say this to the folks in Berkeley. I disagree probably with you on most policy prescriptions, but I will die for your right to decide for yourselves. That's what this is about, right? Who decides? I was recently in College Station, Texas. It's about as conservative a town as you could possibly be in. I feel pretty comfortable in a place like that. Very conservative. And I get on stage and I say, I'll probably agree with what you guys want policy prescription-wise, and I will fight and die for your right to do what you believe here in College Station, Texas. And this is the fundamental question of our time. We have so much energy that we put in the fight about what should be done. Obamacare or non-Obamacare, universal health care, not universal health care, war with Iran, not war with Iran, green initiatives or not green initiatives. These are the fights of the day, but the real fight, the real question is not what is decided. The real question is who decides. That's the question we should ask ourselves. Left or right, center, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Who decides? And the answer is, we decide, right? The people should decide. That means we should disperse the power where? To the people. Do you guys agree that the people should hold the power? So this is the fundamental issue of our day. Who holds the power? These folks go to Congress, they don't listen to us. They don't listen to us. Why? Because congressional elections are broken, because nobody's losing their primary, and humans respond to stimulus. We respond to incentives. If you're in Congress and you know that your constituents don't matter because you can't be thrown out of office, and guys like John Boehner and Eric Cantor come to you and they tell you how to vote, and they say you don't need to listen to your constituents, you're part of our club right now and forevermore, and they'll never be able to throw you out, and we're going to give you money to run, don't worry about it. Who do they listen to? They listen to K Street, not Main Street. Right? Where should they be listening? Should they be listening to us at home? That's where they should be listening. So this is the fundamental issue of our times. Who decides? That's the question that the founders asked. The question wasn't around issues. You know, the founders, we think of them as this homogenous group of people, and this is through the lens of history. We picture all the guys in their wigs and they're deliberating on the Constitution, but the actual men and families that supported and fought in the American Revolution, they were a very diverse group of people. We forget that traveling from Virginia to Maryland was a great distance. Right? We forget that Pennsylvania to New York, it was a great distance to travel between those cities. There were very divergent populations, many of them very much based on their own religious views in their own states and their own areas. And there were a lot of things that those men disagreed upon, probably more than they agreed upon. Particular policy prescriptions would have been very different in the states and very different city to city. But they asked themselves a fundamental question when they sat together, and that question was, who decides? And the answer was certainly not the king, was it? And the answer certainly was not some faraway central government, was it? The answer to the question, who decides, was we decide. The people decide. And that's the very basis for this nation. So I want to encourage you folks to do things and to think of things that always ask that question first. When you hear something that Congress is going to do, there's a natural tendency to think first, I like that, or I don't like that. The Republicans recently passed a bill that says how the president and Congress will be paid or not paid if a budget doesn't pass. Do you guys think Congress should be paid if there's no budget passed? No. Sounds good, doesn't that feel good? Does it make your heart warm to think about not paying those guys? Be careful. Read the Constitution. The Constitution says how Congress and the President shall be paid. The Constitution says that. We can't change that with a law that comes out of Congress, no matter how much we like it. That law is fundamentally unconstitutional. Right? Now, our side, the people who are supposedly the defenders of the Constitution, passed that law. Right? So we got to watch out for that. It's not right, and they'll do it to us over and over. The Republicans in the Senate, not too long ago, they passed a jobs bill. Now, we all know that Harry Reid's not going to let them do anything in the Senate, right? But in that jobs bill was a provision that most of us really like, medical malpractice reform. Who thinks our medical malpractice system is a mess, right? It's adding to our healthcare costs. It's a disaster. I know lots of doctors that are pushing for medical malpractice reform. I'm a big fan. They've done it in Texas. They did a really good job. It's really helped the state. So you think the Republicans doing that in the Senate is a good idea, right? So you guys are getting wise. I tricked you once. I can't trick you again. I can't find a place in the Constitution where medical malpractice reform at the federal level is justified by the Constitution. How can they tell us in the states that they're going to cap medical malpractice judgments in our state legal systems? How can they tell us what attorneys can get paid, whether we like them or not? But from the federal government to the states, the answer is they can't. Except for the Republicans said they could. They did put a justification in the bill. The Senate said, anybody have any idea what clause they used to justify that? Commerce Clause. Does that sound familiar? Those are the Republicans. Now we would think maybe the Republicans in the Senate are worse, but they just passed that same bill in the House of Representatives. Medical malpractice reform at the federal level. So our job, Washington said that the citizens were the final line of defense for the Constitution. If we expect government to protect the Constitution, we will be disappointed, won't we? They have no incentive to protect the Constitution. It ties their hands because that's what it's supposed to do, right? We have the only founding document in the history of the country that was specifically designed to be used as a weapon by the people against the government. And I intend to use it as a weapon against the government. How about you guys? Are you with me? So you guys are on track. You're the point of the spear, and that means you have to talk to your friends and neighbors, not in a confrontational way, not in a you're right and they're wrong kind of a way, because we don't convince people that way, but in a way that says, you and I, we may be Democrat or Republican, we may be liberal or conservative, we may be Californians or New Yorkers, but first and foremost, together, we're Americans. And Americans all believe in protecting this country for our posterity, right? So I want to close by thanking you guys for being here, first of all. And I want to ask you, look, support the folks that put on this event. It costs money to put on these events. So there are donation buckets up here that'll be going around too. Put in your $5, your $20. Look, when I travel around, I always put some money in the jar, because I know it costs money and it's difficult to put on these events. So that's really important. Make sure you support the folks that are putting on that bus tour. It costs a lot of money for that bus to start in Sacramento yesterday and travel all around the state, but it's important. It's going to bring people to the table. It's going to encourage the discussion. And if you guys want to hear more about some of these ideas, we've got at one of the tables over here, I've got some books and some DVDs. I had a book come out in February called The Second American Revolution. Please feel free to go over there and pick up some books. I'll sign those for you. And a big thanks to David and Robert for making this event happen today. Thank you all very much. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Meckler, the great American. That concludes the formal program for today. As you can see, people are kind of getting backed up and headed out. We appreciate you coming today. We anticipate next year this is going to be a celebration of having won a big victory in November.
I got one more thing to say, Mark Meckler, wherever you went, you got me into all this. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much for coming today. We appreciate it. We'll see you next year. As Mark said, if you don't mind making a donation, we would sure appreciate it. And our vendors here, talk to them, get their stuff. Thanks very much. See you next year.